Many aspiring business owners think their CPA's job will start after they open the doors with bookkeeping and tax returns. But some of the most important work they do happens earlier, before you ever sign a franchise agreement. Today's guest sees this firsthand. Aspiring franchise owners come to him holding a franchise disclosure document, 150 pages of fine print, and they think they understand all the important parts. But then they find out they're missing that one detail that changes everything. A CPA who specializes in franchising catches these mistaken expectations regularly, and they're far easier to address before you sign the agreement than after. I'm Scott Elliott with New Chapter Consulting, and this is Ownership Essentials, practical insights for successful business ownership. Now, joining me for this conversation today is John Mollica. He's the co-founder and president of My Franchise CPAs. They offer all the services you'd expect from a CPA firm, things like tax strategy and growth planning, but with specialized knowledge of the nuances of franchised businesses. John, welcome to the show today.
Appreciate it, Scott. Thanks so much for having me. This is great.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. When we first talked about doing this, we agreed that a good theme would be what your CPA should be doing before you sign a franchise agreement, right? We thought that might be a good topic to dive into. Before we get into how you work specifically with clients in this regard, can you tell us a little bit about My Franchise CPAs? Really, what led you to focus specifically on franchise buyers rather than just general small business accounting?
Yeah, it's a really good question. When I started the firm about 9 years ago, we were trying to decide what to focus on, and there's actually an old relationship of mine when I used to work in public accounting that works in small franchise lending, and yeah, they started to refer us some work, and we quickly realized that wow, once you get one down within a brand, you kind of can do the rest, and yeah, the rest is history.
All right, very good. And I guess as you gather more and more clients and you start seeing those, as we talked about, those franchise nuances, that really compounds the value you can offer to your clients, which I think is really great. So, when you start working with new clients, I know you've told me you offer a free initial consultation with people who are considering using your services when they're doing their franchise due diligence. Could you walk us through what actually happens in that initial consultation and what would they expect to walk away with?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So everybody that we talk to is in a different spot. We get referred for people that are looking at options to invest in, that just need guidance around maybe the FDD, maybe around the pro forma, maybe building a pro forma. And we also get referred people that they've picked their brand, they know how they're going to fund, and really they just need help getting up and started. Getting like their business established, their licensing, their tax IDs, and stuff like that. So,
Mhm.
and we also get referred to people who are open and they just either need accounting from scratch, or they need a change, or their taxes are backed up and need some help there.
So it sounds like, yeah, you work with clients all along the ownership spectrum, from those who haven't even decided specifically which franchise business they're going to open, all the way through those who are been operating for a while and are looking for a good CPA to help them operationally. So you have a full spectrum. With those who haven't yet signed a franchise agreement, is there such a thing as too early to have the conversation with a CPA, or or is it better just to have some baseline established right at the beginning when someone's at the start of this process?
I think that for the majority of people that we connect with that are early on in the process like that, this is often the first time that they've ever even considered opening a franchise. So the guidance that we're able to provide around like the FDD and just understanding what that document is saying from a financial standpoint really helps. So yeah, I don't know if there's a too early. I'm always open to. I actually within my firm will connect with anybody that were referred. So Yeah, I'm happy if I knew at the end of the day, maybe they're not ready to work with us today, but I can kind of part some knowledge to them so they have a better understanding of what they're looking at. Uh, Happy to do it.
Okay, great. Well, let's talk a little bit then about when that conversation moves from, this free initial conversation, this consultation that says, here's some general answers to open questions. When does that move into a paid engagement? Like, what are the types of services that make you transition into the client relationship, as opposed to just someone who's offering some open-ended insights?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So it depends on the stage that they're at. So let's focus on that early stage we call the discovery stage, where they're haven't decided on a brand maybe yet. They're not quite sure how they're going to fund, and they just want more guidance around the financials of opening a franchise. What all's involved? What they have an FDD, but do they really understand what it's communicating to them, what they can stand to earn, like in item not 19, what's all involved in opening. So at that point, that's really the earliest point where there's a paid service that we offer called an FDD financial overview. So we'll
Okay.
take the FDD, really like strip it down of the financial terms within the FDD into just a simple spreadsheet. So instead of having to go through the 150 page document to figure everything out, they've got it all together in one spot. And we walk through that with them. So again, just really kind of holding their hand through the financials of the FDD, I think is a good way of putting it.
Okay, no, that's great. So let's dig a little deeper into that. If a client of yours says, they're now engaging you on a paid basis, and they share with you a franchise disclosure document for a concept that they're trying to evaluate. What exactly are you doing with it? So you mentioned that FDD review service, but I'm sure there's probably deeper dives that you do before somebody would sign a franchise agreement. So talk to us a little bit about what types of things might you catch that they might miss on their own, for example.
Yeah, it's a good point. Well, we have a lot of experience in reading FDDs, so we can provide insight around, is this typical? Does anything stand out? Somewhat a recent example of one that I did in item 20, where it goes over like the units that change over time. The
Mhm.
franchise had gone from like 10 down to 1, which you typically want to see it go the opposite direction, right?
Right, sure.
So that's a big example where I could point out like, hey, this is not what you typically are looking for. Um, but beyond just looking at the financial terms in the FDD and explaining those, we'll also build out like a basic pro forma from the FDD, so
Mhm.
they can at least have an estimate of what would a P&L look like for us in year one, year two. Um, and I know that that's like something that the consultants and the franchisors are not supposed to really help them with. So I think that's where we've been really able to come in and help. And yeah, they'll often say, speak to your CPA about this. Well, here we are. This is what we can help with.
Right. Yeah, and to your point, that is very valuable to me as a franchise consultant. And I know franchisors were prohibited, certainly, by the compliance with federal regulations from making any type of financial performance claims, and we don't want to, right? We want
Right.
them doing their due diligence. We want them taking information from the FDD, information from franchisees that they're validating with, collect that information. But I know I feel so much more comfortable when one of my clients takes that information and runs it by a CPA, or asks for you to help them put it into a pro forma. So let's talk more about this pro forma. What goes into that process, right? When you're building a pro forma, is it just, copying and pasting numbers out of the FDD, or what goes into that?
Yeah. So the first area we'll start in building that out is the revenue side. So depending on the brand, the industry, they're going to have different measures of really, and different things that they share with you within item 19. So,
Mm.
a recent example, I helped a couple that was looking at a gym for franchise, like a Pilates studio, and
Okay.
the way that item 19 was presented is they presented different memberships, and for existing locations, like how many imagine like tier A, tier B, tier C type memberships that they were getting. So I could take that information and basically figure out, well, what, if we were to apply that to um their year one and year two, and also factoring like ramp up, what would the top line look like? So it always begins with what is in the FDD, and then I can
Mhm.
kind of extrapolate that to, um, what the potential franchisee could earn. Same with
Sure.
expenses. So item 19 will often, and they're all different. There are
Oh,
FDDs that
yeah.
provide all the detail, down to net income. Some just provide like the gross expenses, gross cost of goods sold, revenue. So I work with what the FDDE has. I also encourage, like, we don't personally go and figure out, well, in the Memphis market, what is rent going to cost? Like, I encourage the franchisee to do their own research on that, and if they provide us that information, then we'll input that into the pro forma.
Excellent. Yeah, it's such a vital service. To your point, every FDD is different. The item 19 information, the financial, performance representations, there's no real single standard. And when it does have, expense information, usually that's just for a corporate or affiliate location, one or two of them. Usually it's not a full system breakdown, right? Not often. So
Right.
helping franchisees before they sign the agreement to really think about what are the total expenses that would hit their P&L, right? That's a vital service because it wouldn't necessarily be complete or clear just from the information included in the franchise disclosure document.
Absolutely.
Now, when we think about pro formas, I know sometimes we'll have a lending partner or a funding specialist. They might help a franchisee with a pro forma that supports lending, right? For getting an SBA loan or something. Are there different versions or flavors of pro formas depending on the purpose, or is there really just one pro forma? You use it for everything. Like, how does that go?
It's a really good question. I mean, I've seen different lender like examples, because we'll often, when we work with a franchisee, let's say we're setting up like their business, they'll often share information that they're receiving from the bank. And I've seen pro formas that are really detailed, a couple years. I've seen a single year, and really just more high level categories, but they might not be showing all the detail that could go into their P&L. They might
Mhm.
not be showing like the cash flow impact. If we think about what was the initial investment, how much is being funded, what are they cash flowing at the end of each month. So I've seen different examples.
Yeah, I can imagine that as the CPA, you're really providing them with a decision tool. Is this likely to be a good business for them based on what you and they are projecting the business could be? And maybe you do, best case, worst case, medium case scenarios. I'm not sure how you do all that, but clearly that level of analysis is an important step in understanding whether a business is a good idea to proceed. Have you found it to be the case where after you've done an analysis, done a pro forma with a client, they decide, wow, this business just isn't as attractive as I thought it would be?
Yeah, we've had both. We've had where
Mhm.
once we're done, they go, "This looks great," and then they proceed. I recently worked with somebody, not that they were looking to buy a brand new franchise, but an acquisition.
Mhm.
And when we really ran through the numbers, we realized the seller was asking for 750K. I ran through my analysis; it made more sense, around like 450K. There was like a 300K discrepancy.
Oh, wow.
business was on a consistent decline, top line revenue. So they ultimately decided to not pursue that. And now I know they're working with their consultant to look at new. They're going to go the new franchise route.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a great example because as a CPA, you have that responsibility to advocate for the buyer, right? You're not just crunching
Yes.
numbers. You're not just trying to make a deal look good at all, right? You have
Yeah.
that responsibility to show them to the best of your ability what is this opportunity before them, and
Yeah.
think through what's possible, but also think through what's likely. So that's great to hear.
If I could just add to that, I think that's a
Yeah.
really good point. When someone's going through and buying a franchise, having like that independent third party CPA that's not the franchisor, because of course the franchisor at the end of the day they'd like you to buy their franchise, but is somebody independent of them with a financial lens really assisting the buyer? And some people, it's rare, but some people have that background to figure
Mm,
that out on their own. Nine
mhm.
times out of 10, in my experience, they really don't. So I think for anybody out there is listening, you should work with a CPA if you're going to buy a franchise
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, it's a big commitment. It's a big investment. The agreements are, 5, 10, sometimes more years, right, in the initial
Oh,
terms. It really helps to have that extra set of eyes. Maybe
yep.
somebody is already a CPA. That may be an exception, but you can be very financially savvy and still benefit from the services of a CPA in this regard.
That's true. Yeah.
So, a lot of the planning and the preparation work that you do, it seems like it's drawing on information from the franchise disclosure document itself, plus, as we mentioned, some data gathered from validation calls with existing franchisees.
Yep.
With that in mind, is there anything specific to the franchise agreement itself that a CPA should be reviewing? I know I always encourage my clients to work with a franchise attorney looking at the
Mhm.
actual franchise agreement, but is there
Sure.
anything that you look at from a CPA lens in the agreement itself?
So, I mean, the agreement from a financial standpoint should be just pulling on the information that's presented in the FDD. So,
Okay.
not
Mhm.
specifically. Good point on the franchise attorney. They're obviously going to look at things from a whole, from a legal perspective. What all is involved in that agreement? Are we agreeing to for the 10 years of the typical agreement? Um, but from a financial standpoint, it's pretty consistently whatever's presented in the FDD, like in item 7, for example, where they're going over the details of or 6 and 7, the items, the recurring expenses, and then the investments should all be reflected within the agreement.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's great. Yeah, the FDD has wonderful, great information in it. But again, what they're actually signing is that the franchise agreement, right? That's the
Yeah,
contract.
sure.
But yeah, it makes sense how you described it. Let's talk. I'm glad you brought up, item 6, item 7.
Mhm.
Are there things that you reveal or help clients understand about that data? Like, for example, I know that FDDs have 3 months of working capital, right? That's typically what's baked into the FDD,
Mhm.
and yet, depending on the business, sometimes it's not 3 months to, profitability or to break even or positive cash flow or whatever. Um,
Yeah,
Sometimes they're gonna need more than just, working capital than what's in there. Talk to us a little bit about what you do to help them be well prepared, when based on the information that's in the FDD and the information that may not be in the FDD.
good question. So, one thing I always point out for both item 6, 7 also applies at 19 is the footnote. So they don't always realize that the franchisor will put more detailed information of what all is involved in each expense down below. Like
Mhm.
when they think about this is actually a recent one I heard. A Someone who bought a franchise was upset after the fact because they thought the royalty percentage was on net income. Well,
Mm,
if you look in the footnotes for any item 6, they'll always explain it's on gross sales and specifically what that is. It's the money you bring in less your refunds and discounts, but and sales tax, but including all sort. So it has the detail in there that you really need to understand what's
Mhm.
involved. So that's one. Another thing is just a comparison. Again, after looking at so many FDDs, I could tell them if I see a royalty that's 10%, that it, could be high compared to what we typically see. If it's 4%, it might be low compared to what we typically see.
Mhm.
So just like that, kind of understanding how the numbers relate to what a typical FDD could include. There's a section in there about audits and the requirements that a franchisee has to report their gross sales. So understanding that, like, that gives them a little more insight into the relationship, like, what they have to stay on top of. Another thing is the low and high estimates of by item 7. So understanding, and that comes back to the footnotes, what makes the high estimate high, what makes the low estimate low. They'll typically explain that within the notes. So I'll usually dig into that with them as well. Just a few examples.
No, those are great examples. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh,
Now, John, I know there is some natural overlap between the services that a CPA firm offers and even what like the franchise funding specialist does. I think about one you mentioned earlier, creating the business entity. I know some franchise funding specialists will help them create the entity so that it meets all the necessary criteria for
mhm.
whatever program they're doing. How do you typically work alongside and complement the funding specialist with the same client? What does collaboration with them look like in practice?
It's a really good question. So I always want to understand what the prospective franchisee, who they're already working with, and
Mhm.
what they already have covered that we do. And I'm looking for where are those gaps. So we're never going to come in and go, oh, hey, you're working with that guy. Well, we do that too. No, it's like I want to make sure they have everything that they need to open successfully and operate successfully, right? So and before they make the decision, to help them to make that decision if that's where they're at. So that's really what it is. It's just it's a detailed and careful initial consult where I'll figure all the details out there, and then present them with, hey, these are the gaps that I identified that you don't have covered that we could help you with.
Okay, very good. Yeah, that's important. I think that most clients should be working with both, right? And for whatever specific services they need, and in those areas of overlap, work with the group that either uh, a they're most comfortable with, or b that collaboratively. I think it's really nice when advisors aren't competing with one another, right? I
Yeah.
like your approach where it's like, okay, what do you have covered? Okay, you test a few to make sure they really have it covered. And if they've got it, you just work on the gaps. I think that's a great approach. So good.
Absolutely.
Again, going back to this idea of what a CPA should be doing before they sign a franchise agreement, what are some things that if they don't do them before signing, it's a lot harder or more costly to fix after the fact, or if it can be fixed at all? Have you seen any mistakes made because somebody didn't do enough due diligence on the front end?
I mean, I think at a really a high level, if they sign and the investment maybe didn't make sense for them. So if they didn't go through the due diligence, the building the pro forma, the validating and getting the actual numbers from existing franchisees, they might go in thinking this investment is going to give me what I need from it, and it couldn't have from the beginning. And that's not to knock the brand or that
Mhm.
investment, but it could just be, hey, I'm coming from 150K like a W2 corporate role, and that's what my household needs to earn in order for this to make sense. Well, when we run through the numbers, you're not going to exceed 100K within the first two years.
Mhm.
Okay, well, then the math doesn't work there, right? So just doing that due diligence and really understanding what the investment is going to cost up front, and then what they can expect to earn from that, and making sure that fits their needs, I think is incredibly important. before they sign. After they sign, then it gets into stuff like ensuring that they structure their business correctly and ensuring
Mm.
that they get everything they need from a licensing standpoint. We've seen examples where people will structure the business in a way that's really not tax efficient, and they end up just spending a lot more than they need to, or they don't get appropriately permitted and licensed, and they get like a stop order issued
Mm.
while they're on a job. That has had that we've seen that as well. So um, there's a lot of
Mhm.
things that can happen along the way that you just gotta listen to all the advisors around you on the way up.
Mhm. No, I think those are all good examples because it isn't just about the financial projection, right? Not just the pro forma. To your point about necessary permits and licensing and things like that that could make a difference. So, a thorough checklist from an advisor, a CPA firm like yourself, really can go a long way in helping avoid headaches in the future. These necessary parts of doing business in certain industries. So, just know it going in. So that's good.
Yeah,
Appreciate it. John, I really appreciate you taking some time with me today. I know one of the key reasons I wanted to have you on is, I think we first met last year sometime, and I'd been a subscriber to your newsletter, receiving your emails. I found those always to be very helpful. The information that your team puts out. Kudos to you on having relevant information, timely information. Whether it's tax related or other types of things. Good questions. So I really am grateful you were able to take some time with me and share some of those insights with us right here live on the show. So thank you for being here.
of course. Happy to come on, and I appreciate the opportunity.
One takeaway that I really appreciated in this conversation was John's point about advocacy. A good CPA isn't just running numbers you hand them. They're an independent perspective with no stake in whether you buy a particular franchise, which means that they're free to tell you when the math doesn't support what you need from the investment. John's example about the high W 2 earner, that one's worth remembering too. When the numbers showed that the business wouldn't get him above $100,000 within the first few years, that gap between what he needed and what the investment could realistically deliver, that became clear before he signed, not after. If you're early in your franchise research, even a free consultation with a franchise CPA can tell you whether you're asking the right questions. And if you're getting closer to a decision, a pro forma built with that kind of guidance gives you something concrete to evaluate the opportunity against before you commit. I'm Scott Elliott with New Chapter Consulting, and this is Ownership Essentials, Practical Insights for Successful Business Ownership.